Welcome to Short Course, episode 96, for April 1st, 2023. I'm your host, Ben Barry. Just wanted to knock out a quick one this week, talking about the match I shot last weekend, which was the South Carolina Section Championship, hosted once again at Belton Gun Club. It was a great match, honestly. I know that there were some issues that the Saturday shooters ran into, which we'll get to, but to be totally honest, my experience shooting on Sunday was just, I really couldn't have been better. The match, like I said, is at Belton, which is a facility that, if not for the layout of the bays, would be nearly perfect. The bays are a good size. The gravel offers plenty of traction, great drainage. We ended up getting about a 30-minute downpour in the middle of our day. And aside from a few muddy patches outside the shooting area, it really didn't impact the shooting for the rest of the day. Everything drained. There was no standing water. It was awesome. Honestly, it was a great match. The stages were great, honestly. I remember, especially last year, it was a 32 rounder where you started with all your mags on the table, and I was shooting in production. So I think that's the only time that I can remember that I've actually stowed 3 mags on my belt. And then picked up a 4th to load the gun, but there was just no other way to shoot that stage, which I thought was, a shame. That seemed kind of short-sighted, but there were no issues like that this time. There was one stage where there was one spot where you could post up and shoot 13 shots, but that was really only noticeable by contrast to everything else. I thought the stages did a great job of setting things up very positionally, so you really were only shooting 2 or 3 targets from any given spot before you moved to the next position, which wasn't necessarily far away, but it would be a step or a turn. So it wasn't none of the stages were memory by any measure. You could sort of plot your route through the stage, and the targets would appear in front of you, and you just had to shoot them. There wasn't really a lot of memorization and back and forth and that kind of thing. So really, I think they did a great job with that. Obviously, the folks who were involved with setting up the match, on build day, really there's a level of craftsmanship and attention to detail that's really necessary to get those things right. Before the match, I had talked to both Matt Hopkins and Kyle Stevens. I think they were both planning to be there for setup day. I don't know if that actually panned out, but I know there were a few other people there. I know Ryan Flowers is local. I think Tyler Meisenheimer. So a bunch of guys, GMs, obviously high level shooters, that whoever was there, I don't want to name somebody, leave somebody out. I genuinely don't know. But whoever was there, the quality obviously showed through. And like I said, in terms of shooting, I thought the stages were fair. Nothing was really over the top. The shots were all doable. You just had to basically decide how hard you wanted to make any given shot. And there were, if I had to pick out something that I would probably do differently, the use of the movers in a few spots were very either sort of hit or miss, in the sense that if you got the timing just right, things went well. If they didn't, then you were stuck basically waiting for a second pass with nothing really to do. And there were kind of there were 3 places that this happened. There was a 4th mover that was just an over-the-top swinger where basically you could shoot it, you could take as many passes on it as you wanted, and you didn't really have to wait very long for it. But the other moving targets, there was a drop turner that you had to get 4 hits on. There was this sequence of 4 bobbers where they triggered left to right, so they basically popped up in a little cardboard wave kind of thing. And then there was one of the Holy Monkey double pivot swingers. And basically in all 3 cases, the only way to get a really decent score and a good time was just to commit to shooting them on the first pass. So in the case of the drop turner, if it turned away and you didn't get all 4 shots on it, since there were no penalty mics, it really was not worth it to wait for another turn just to get, say, a 4th shot on it. So you basically just pre-programmed in, hey, when it starts turning, I start cranking off 25 splits, and I'm going to get as many alphas and charlies, on this drop turner as I can, and in that one pass, and then I'm out of there. And by the same token, the way the bobber wave worked, I mean, to some degree, I think by the time the 4th one went away, the first one was starting to come back, but if you had missed a target, or if you had a light strike or a jam or anything, you were basically having to wait a whole cycle for whichever target you needed a second shot on. And then the Holy Monkey, it just, the way it presented it was very similar, where you basically got one really good presentation at the start and then a bunch of bad ones, and then like the fourth or fifth one was good again. And so there again, you just kind of had to commit and say, I'm gonna take 2 shots on the first pass, and whatever I get, I get. And to be totally honest, for a guy of my skill, that actually wasn't that big of a deal. I shot all of those targets just fine. Like I said, I committed to a certain pace and had decent points on all of those. To me, I think that kind of gimmicky stuff I would probably find that, I would find it demotivating as a B-class shooter, probably. Something like the bobbers, where you're kind of like, oh, like, okay, where do I go back to? I didn't hear anybody really talking bad about it, so I mean, maybe it was a crowd pleaser for everybody of all classifications. Like I said, to me, the drawback to something like that is you have to commit to a certain plan, and if you don't hit it, then it's not like it's not going to be a gradual degradation in your score. It's like either you had a really good run or you had a bad run, and there wasn't really a lot of middle ground in between. If you missed the first pass, you were either taking no penalty mics in the case of the drop turner, or just basically having to wait for a second exposure. So that's really the biggest complaint I can make. I will say, on the other hand, so it was actually one stage that had the Holy Monkey, the drop turner, and a door prop that I thought it was really smartly designed and really well built. So basically, it was an 8 foot, 8 foot tall, sheet of plywood, basically, with hinges mounted on the bottom and little anti-skid pads. But the idea was that it started closed, and you had, at the start of the stage, you started behind it and you had to push it open, and it would, the hinges were at the bottom. And so it would fall forward, and then you'd have to move in and basically stand on top of it, or at least move over it to stand on the gravel on the other side to get into the shooting area. And honestly, it was a very fair challenge, but it was definitely something that kind of you don't see every day. It was very much that I think it struck just the right balance of something that it might not be worth putting that level of effort into it just for a club match, but at the same time, it was like I said, it was a well-built prop. It was very reliable. It was easy to reset. And so it worked well for all 200-300 shooters, however many people, shot this match. So I liked seeing that. I definitely think it is very easy to shy away from kind of taking risks like that, running stuff that you don't necessarily see at a local match. And for all I know, I mean, I could go back and try and look at their monthly match videos. For all I know, they had been testing this thing at monthlies, which honestly is the way you should do it, right? Build the prop, try it out a few times, make sure it, there's not something you're not seeing, and then throw it in the bigger match. And so it kind of follows this arc of things starting off small, and those successful ones grow and get exposed on the larger stage. So other than that, like I said, the stages were just straight up good tests of shooting. There were a few where you probably could have deleted 1, 2, maybe 3 targets, and the stage really wouldn't have been that much worse. It was just kind of dragging up the round count for no real productive reason, but it wasn't egregious by any means. And again, you were still sort of having to move between positions. There definitely were some, I think, if they could go back to setup day and change something, I think probably the one thing that gave them some issues, and is not something that I really would have thought of, was the issue of having poppers obscured by plastic barrels. And basically the issue was, per the rule book, any full diameter hit on the barrel is a strike through hardcover. If it knocks down the popper, then that's a stop and a reshoot. And I don't think in most cases people were trying to do it on purpose. It was just one of these things where people would either be trying to leave the position or not come fully into position. There were 2 stages in particular that come to mind that had poppers. Really, the popper was really the target that kind of rooted you to that position, where you had to hit the spot really precisely. And so if you underran or overran the position even slightly, then the popper might be partially obscured by the barrel. And then, you're trying to shoot around the barrel. I don't think anybody, was trying to, X-ray vision through the barrel or anything, but it just happens that you might crank off a shot and it goes through the barrel, but it comes out at an angle where it still has enough juice to knock the popper down. And so on one of the stages, they were able to bring in Steel Challenge plates, the big rectangular plates, and hang them behind the barrels, so it didn't change the target presentation, but it meant that if the shot went through the barrel, it would hit the steel plate instead of the popper, which was a good fix in that case. I'm not sure why they weren't able to do that on the second one that comes to mind, but it was it was one of those things that definitely was a cause of some reshoots. And really, when you're trying to run a major match, reshoots are just, that's what absolutely kills you. So on our squad, so shooting on Sunday, we started probably definitely earlier than I think I would have liked, and earlier than probably I think some of the ROs would have liked. We had first shots at 7:30, which was basically as early as was reasonably possible to start shooting with just the available sunlight. And so that probably could have been pushed back a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why they scheduled it that early, given that at least on Sunday we were scheduled, I think, to start at 7:30 and be done by 1 o'clock or 1:30. And I get it, you got the hour arbitration, then you want your staff to be able to tear down and get on the road. But I know I probably would have appreciated, an hour more sleep, and some of the staff probably would have too. But hey, for staff making the drive home, I can, I can see it. But we started nice and early. We ended up having about a 30-minute, 45-minute maybe rain delay where we just had this band of rain just dump on us. And I thought they did the right thing. They just called a ceasefire, because you don't want one squad continuing to run and then they catch up with they have to shoot some stages in the rain, and then they catch up with the squad in front of them and they're waiting around. Just given the way the timing was going, it was just the right thing. Just let the band of rain blow through and then get back to shooting, because once it was done, it was perfectly clear. And like I said, it was a great day of shooting. I am aware that apparently staff day was a bit of a marathon, and that Saturday there was some kind of, it doesn't seem like there was one single issue, but there were some kind of compounding issues that basically led to Saturday being a marathon as well. I think with the last shooters finishing up close to 8 p.m., which was definitely running out of daylight. So I didn't hear a postmortem on what happened there. Hopefully there'll be some kind of discussion of that. I wasn't privy to it. I was just walking around that day, and I ended up leaving the range around 6:30. So I don't know what the exact situation was. My sense is it was largely, from what I heard, it was largely related to reshoots, just for various different things all over. But not the stuff that you normally would think of. The props and the activators seem to be pretty reliable, but it was just things like the steel getting shot through barrels and whatnot. And this was a staff reset match, and it was it was just great. Each stage had a ton of folks. They were able to kind of spread out the load. And, you'd have on a stage with movers or something, you'd have someone go setting the steel and setting the mover while you were going around scoring and pasting the paper targets. And so, yeah, as a shooter, it was, it was nice, especially being on a squad with friends. We could kind of spend more time with each other, and, you even got a little bit of time to talk to the staff in some cases. And yeah, I mean, I keep hearing that Area 6 is special. This can't be done everywhere else. I don't know why that would be true. But yeah, this match was great. And I really, if you have the opportunity to shoot the North Carolina section in September, hopefully it'll be as good of an experience as that. If not, come back to this one. To me, this is the way that nationals should be run. And the fact that, a couple podunk state matches can put on an experience like this, I think is really sets the bar. I will say the one thing I guess because I just can't get away with saying only nice things. The one thing was the way that certain squads or certain stages were running their staff reset, especially on stages where you kind of started at the back and finished at the front. They would do some kind of scoring ahead or split scoring, and all things being equal, if you can take advantage of the speed of staff reset and cut down on that kind of thing, I think that would be good. I definitely think it's always nice as a competitor when you can walk with the timer RO and just be there to sort of score each individual target. And to be honest, in my experience, at least at club levels, when you start trying to get people, multiple spots trying to score targets, it doesn't save as much time as you would think versus just as soon as the shooter's unloaded, you just go all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and just score in a big arc all around the stage. And I will say, at the very least, I definitely... Now, one thing I will say, one nice thing about Staff Reset is it makes it easy to have a delegate available to follow whoever is doing the scoring ahead. If there is one person doing the scoring ahead, I think there was at least one stage where you had one person pre-scoring the left side and a second person pre-scoring the right side. And so in a scenario like that, even if you nominate a delegate, who do they follow, right? There's literally double scoring ahead being done, which I don't think is 100% kosher. I think if you ran that by an RMI, they might say, yeah, don't do that. And again, I don't think that really ends up saving you that much time. So all things being equal, if I can have my cake and eat it too, having staff reset while also having a chance as the competitor to, walk with the timer RO and score all the targets, or at least, all the ones that aren't little 3-yard burner, right in your face type targets. It wasn't really an issue, but it definitely was one of those where there was at least one stage where I was kind of like looking around, like, the guy with the tablet was hearing scores called out from multiple spots, and I was like, what is going on? So yeah, like I said, if you have the benefit of staff reset, I think using it to give the shooter that extra ability to follow the timer RO around and see all the targets is nice. Again, not every competitor cares, but for those of us that do, it is nice to, even if it's Alpha Charlie, see where the Charlie went. I know this is some first world problem stuff right here, but it would be nice. They did not end up having any kind of chrono or equipment check, which definitely was something that people noticed and commented on, particularly the equipment check. I heard numerous people talking about how they saw other people walking around with guns that were, too far from the belt or too high or too low and that kind of stuff. And I mean, I get it. If I had to guess, they probably just either didn't have the staff or didn't have someone they could dedicate to doing the chrono work. I mean, I will say the actual bays ended up, seemed like they were well staffed. They had a lot of volunteers that are club members running the golf carts, driving people between the two different sides of the range, which is, as I started to mention at the top of the show, that's really the main drawback is just the fact that the bays are separated in groups. Although I did hear a couple of people tell me that they've just bought a bunch more land and they're planning to dig a bunch, like a dozen or two crazy numbers of more bays, to the point where I guess hopefully a year or 2, 3 down the road, we wouldn't even have to use the one set of bays that are all the way off to the left. Like, I guess at some point there might be 12 bays within walking distance of each other, and then you would just use those. That would be awesome. Again, the facility is great. It seems like they have a really active, involved membership. Every year that I'm there, the folks that are running the golf carts seem to just be club members. I don't think they're USPSA competitors, but they're people that are just happy to be there. And honestly, I mean, they always have a smile and a kind word, which, I mean, there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for that hospitality. It really seems like people, folks are proud of their club. They're proud of hosting such a big match, and they should be. Again, it's a great facility. But yeah, so no chrono, no equipment check. I mean, I know I'm kind of a stickler for this stuff, but on the other hand, I've also gone on record as saying that the way most matches run a mandatory chrono, where you just file in and you know your bullets are either going to be collected at the first stage, or you just walk up to chrono with the bullets you want to chrono. At that point, the system is so easy to cheat. At least chrono is really kind of pointless. Having equipment check on each bay, for example, before each squad starts, doing a lineup and having a CRO or an RO on each stage, equipment check everyone, and then kind of spot checking people throughout the match. That probably would have helped. That's actually one of the things coming out of the North Carolina section last year that I'm advocating for changing this year is, we would do equipment check when people came through chrono, but it might be with 1 or 2 stages left in their match. And at that point, the rules say anything that's a score that's done, you don't touch that, but they have to fix any equipment issues before they can start the next stage. But I think having someone on each bay that sort of knows ideally every certified RO and CRO would know, but having at least one person on each bay to just check, the position, the distance from the belt and the height and all that for each gun, each competitor before they start the first stage, I think it's the way to go. At least that's what I would like to see. It's the way certainly I think nationals should run. I think it is recommended. I think the rulebook lists that as sort of a recommendation, but not a requirement. And so I think that's the way we're going to try and do it at North Carolina. At the end of the day, does that kind of equipment stuff make a huge difference? Not really, but at the same time, if we're going to have rules, let's follow them. But it was a pretty minor thing, I think, as long as everybody was being honest, which there's no money on the line, so why would you not be? It didn't really impact the actual outcome of the match, but it definitely was something that kind of made me scratch my head. And this kind of dovetails into the final point, which is they did have one of the things that they really tried to make a marquee thing was the size of their vendor area. And it was definitely sizable. I think there were 9 different vendors there. And there was a system where when you registered, you got a little card, and if you went to 6 or more of the vendors, so each vendor had a little, craft store punch that was a different shape. And so you were supposed to get 6 or more punches, and then you could drop your card in the box for, I thought it was just like raffling off 1 or 2 things. Apparently, if you like that, the whole prize pool, every prize that was, that was sent to the match was awarded by people that filled out their punch cards. I didn't realize that, so I didn't end up doing it because I figured they were just gonna like raffle off 1 gun or something. So I had other stuff going on. I ended up sitting down with Brian Conley from Hunters HD Gold to record an episode of his podcast, and so I did that on Saturday when all the guys that were on my squad were in the vendor area. And then when we got through there on Sunday, because we were delayed by the rain and the stage 1 was open, we ended up just kind of skipping over it. But again, most of the folks on our squad had already seen what they wanted to see. And I will say one of the vendors there, who I don't know exactly who was representing them, but apparently one of the vendors there that had some product that they were demoing was Targets USA, and some of the guys that were on my squad are the match director and the other people involved in putting on the Sir Walter match. And apparently they saw some product from Targets USA that, they could have gone to the website and seen some pictures, but apparently seeing it in person, it was really impressive. I think they were talking about the way they have some kind of plate system where the plate it just tilts back. It doesn't fall off the base. You don't have to pick it up out of the mud. It's easier to reset. So it's kind of more like resetting a popper than resetting a falling plate. And hopefully it's more resilient to, getting shot low and rattling the stand and having the plate fall off. Again, I didn't get to see it, but it was interesting that obviously there was some value there in having that in-person experience. And, I think to some degree, not all sponsors of a match should have to have a physical presence there. To some degree, if you can just send some product or write a check and have your name in the match book, have some banners up, right? It's a form of, it's just advertising. It's a way, it's like putting an ad in the magazine or something. But the fact that there was this opportunity for folks that did want to have a physical presence, and it made sense. There were a number of gun vendors. So Masterpiece Arms, who was the title sponsor, was there with, I think they had like 10 or 12 of their guns that you could just, and what was interesting is they had set up the vendor area right next to a shooting bay. And so you could take the gun and just walk over and shoot it. And there were a couple other gun vendors there. Da Vinci, I think, had some PCCs. Zero Delta had, I don't know if they were actually shooting their guns or if they were just there to, to show them off. But it was an interesting setup. And I mean, for me, like as someone who has a bunch of guns and I'm not really looking to buy, new guns, it didn't really hold much appeal, but I can see, like it seemed like people really enjoyed it. And for me, if we had time in the vendor area as scheduled, I probably would have just sat down and had a drink and had some water and eaten some beef jerky or something and recharge my batteries a little bit. And they had some food. They had like a barbecue vendor on site who was doing the staff meals, and so maybe gotten a plate of barbecue or something. So given how well the schedule was running, I wouldn't have minded it. It does seem like they probably could have done chrono on that bay at the same time. So, at some point during your time in the vendor area, you also go chrono your stuff. But yeah, again, for whatever reason, it wasn't there. But it was definitely interesting. I think people, it felt like a big deal after the match on Sunday once folks were done shooting. I saw a lot of people kind of go back to the vendor area and they were kind of milling around and talking to the vendors and stuff. So it was, it was well done all around. I know I was definitely skeptical about, the stuff about, like you got to make sure you go and visit. It'll be a scheduled stop on the calendar. But, if the next stage had been full and we'd had nothing else to do, yeah, definitely circulate around. And, the fact that we were running behind because of the rain and it was Sunday afternoon, so some of the vendors were starting to pack up because they wanted to, get on the road back to wherever they had to go. So it was interesting. I have no complaints about it. So yeah, this is a lot of different aspects, but on the whole, aside from those few minor complaints, it really was a great match. Huge props to everybody that helped set it up. A lot of credit to I believe this was Todd Holmes' first time as the South Carolina section coordinator and match director. I believe he was involved as sort of in an assistant shadowing type role last year. I think that's the case, but this was the first time it was, the big show, and it went great. There was, there was a hiccup where a stage had to get tossed. I heard that it was related to targets getting changed in some kind of inconsistent manner, which, yeah, I mean, you don't like to have it happen. It's one of those detail things that you hope to eliminate, but at the same time, stuff happens. I think it did change the outcome of the match a little bit, but not hugely. I mean, you go from 10 stages down to 9. 9 is still a pretty representative number. You don't want to have a 6-stage match and then, have one of those thrown out, but stuff happens. I certainly, the stage that was thrown out was actually the one that I had the best percentage placement on before it was tossed out. So I certainly would have been happy to have it stay in, but I'm glad that they did the right thing. And when the issue was realized, just cut it off and be done with it. And, other than that, it was a great match. I have my match video up on my YouTube channel, barryshooting.com/YouTube. If you want to see it, I got the first person and the third person, including the stage that it ended up getting tossed. But it was a great match. If you're in the area and you have a chance to shoot at Belton for the South Carolina match or their monthlies, definitely do it. I think they're doing really cool stuff. This planned expansion is definitely something to keep an eye on. I won't say too much more than that, but definitely something to keep an eye on for the future. So that wraps up this episode of Short Course. My email is ben@barryshooting.com. Talk to you next time.